Good morning everyone. We have started the day down at the Messy Hen Cafe just down the road, and we are here to meet a good friend of ours. So we're going to start the day with fantastic coffee and croissant. Just look at that. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? So come with us on today's adventure.
We've just set out on a walk after having a little coffee, and what is this bug? You are fascinating. It's iridescent in colour. It's quite an unusual little character. If anybody can actually identify what that bug is, we would love to know, because really quite a stocky little bug. It was a bit of a beefcake,
wasn't he?
Felt like if somebody tried or accidentally stood on it, it'd lift up your foot and throw you over. It looked that big. Maybe it would, I don't know. Yeah, crack on with the walk. Hopefully no bugs attack us. We're heading down onto the beach now, and we've got a guest appearance. Look at this. Maybe
Was that police or like?
it might either be rescue. If anybody knows, the blue and yellow helicopters, are they search and rescue or are they police? There was a boat that it was just hovering over before, so I don't know whether they were shouting at them or whether they were trying to rescue them. I don't know, but let us know if you guys know what the yellow and blue helicopters are there for. Cody's trying her best now to adapt into the water. He's okay in like you said, a little bit more stationary water, maybe like by a pool or stuff, but he's getting a treat now for braving up and mustering up the courage to 2-3 steps in the water. Sounds about right.
Everything's scary when you're a little man.
It's okay, little man. Oh, I gotta get
Another one.
honestly.
No, it's in your eyes.
Can you?
No,
Oh,
no,
Picco, you
no.
crazy dog.
No, we gotta wash you now.
Oh, Peo. Oh, Peo, that's not good. We're gonna have to find a shower, Cody, because he won't like the water. So
Yeah.
we'll have to find a shower. Oh no, there's a dog in the distance. As you can
You can't have a go at that dog when you look like you do.
He's had to have a water poured on his face because his sand was, as you saw in the last clip, all over his eyes.
In your eyes, silly dog. Oh, your eyes look sore now.
Now he's going to sleep. You're not listening. You'll need another one, I think, when we get home, but that's the majority out. Look at this state of you. Oh.
So we've just decided to get a fresh loaf made here, and the lady's just slicing it for us. So you can choose to have it sliced. A fresh tiger loaf. Looks absolutely amazing.
So in today's video, we want to run through some of the similarities and differences that we've noticed in Australia and the UK. We just want to head this up by saying that we are actually from the north of England, here, and we've moved to the sunny coast in Australia, here. So what we say must be taken with a pinch of salt, because Australia is an absolutely massive place. So it's our experience and personal experience from living in the Sunshine Coast rather than Australia as a whole. And the same to the UK as well. Would be completely different to somebody's experience who moved from London in England all the way to Melbourne in Australia. So this is our personal experience, not the direct representative of everybody as a whole. I hope that makes sense. So the first thing I do want to cover more than anything, and we actually mentioned this somewhat similar in a previous video where we spoke about the size of Australia. So since making that video, I've actually gone away and done a bit more research into the actual scale and size of Australia in comparison to the UK for a bit more of a kind of perspective rather than just a number for us guys to understand. That's Aussies and Brits who might not really understand the scale difference. So rather than talking maths and getting a little bit boring, what I went and did is I found the size of the UK and then I found the size of Australia, and I basically saw how many times, doing a bit of maths and equation work, how many times the UK could fit in to Australia as a whole. And it turns out that you could fit the UK, do you know how many times?
I guess maybe 20 times.
20 times is a good guess, but actually it's 31. So basically you could fit 31 and a half United Kingdoms in Australia. It just really does give you a whole scale and size of the place. When we're talking about our opinion is a minute perspective on the scale of Australia, definitely. But even the UK, you go 10 minutes down the road in the UK and the accent really does change. So although the scale isn't there, culturally there are a lot of differences depending on the area you are in the UK.
The first point that we wanted to cover is the weather.
The weather.
The weather's a biggie. It's a huge part that sets us apart.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So from where we're from in the north, it's quite wet consistently all year round.
Dismal, grey skies. Now that can be said for a lot of the UK, but no more so than Manchester, the north in particular. That area is very wet, very drizzly, very damp, a lot of damp problems in those, and just I can't really describe it unless you're an Aussie that's been to the UK, but it's just consistently grey skies. Even through summer, it can be quite a dismal experience.
Yeah, I think it can be quite shocking for Aussies that we've spoken to, that they're quite shocked when they go there and they do realise that it is quite a consistent thing. It's not, we're not just saying it, we're not exaggerating. It is pretty much grey all the time. On a similar point to the weather, the daylight hours, again, are very different. We've just come into spring here in Queensland, and we have noticed that the sun sets around 6 p.m. in the evenings. Now, what's quite funny is in the UK, in the summer, it stays light till about 10 p.m. at night, but then in the winter, it can go dark as early as 3 p.m. So
that scale of daylight it does really bog down a lot of Brits, especially in those winter months when it gets colder, gets a little bit rainier, boggier weather. You can literally leave work in the morning at 9 o'clock and it still not be light during winter, and come out of work and it be dark. You've literally, if you work in an office with no windows, you can basically not see sunlight in a whole day.
Which is, I'm sure that's pretty crazy for a lot of us Australians.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's quite a big difference. And I know the daylight hours don't really kind of change too much. It does obviously go back a little bit in the summer.
Might be
sunsets at
2 hours
7
difference.
or
yeah,
you know, whatever that is. But yeah, that's quite a noticeable difference for us.
Before we wrap up on the weather, I do want to make sure that people are aware, that we are aware, that the weather is going to completely change in the summer months. So during that Christmas period, we haven't yet to experience that. And I look forward to making some videos when we do experience it, because we've heard those high 30s into 40s can be absolutely excruciating. So for us, that isn't something we've experienced in the Sunshine Coast, but we are looking forward to basically experiencing it. And another point as well, as we mentioned the size and scale of Australia, Melbourne is a little bit more similar in weather with 4 seasons all year round. So we are genuinely just speaking about our experience in the Sunshine Coast rather than Australia as a whole, because Australia is so big. You even get something like the Snowy Mountains get more snowfall than the Alps each year, which is nothing. If you didn't know about Australia, you wouldn't know that even existed in Australia. But yeah, that's basically a little bit of a wrap up on the rainfall and the weather and the daylight hours all into one.
Another point that we'd like to cover is lifestyle. So a big reason why we moved here is lifestyle. So back home in the UK, a lot of our lifestyle was suited around the footy, so the football, going watching football matches with the family. But other than that, there wasn't much of a lifestyle. It's all very much work, more than like a work-life balance that you guys definitely do have.
Yeah.
So it's been really nice.
On a whole, that may be not for everybody, but Aussies do seem to have the work-life balance nailed as a generalisation more than the Brits do.
Yeah.
The Brits, don't get me wrong, the Brits are hard workers and they really do work hard, a lot of them, but there isn't too much to maybe go and enjoy. During those summer months, guys really do get out, enjoy the sun, but it is kind of tough too a lot of the year. I think the weather, again, connecting to lifestyle, the weather might open up Aussies to a lot more opportunities to go and enjoy their life more than the Brits do time to time.
So like you Aussies that have grown up, you know, with the ocean and, you know, a lot of surfing and outdoor activities, that's not so much really what we have in the UK. Maybe more down south, but definitely not so much up north. So yeah, that's a biggie for us. So it's been a big flipping lifestyle, just being able to go out and enjoy walks every day, not opening up your window and going, it's gonna rain all day today, so maybe we don't. You know, there was many times we went out in the rain with a raincoat on and we weren't bothered, but majority of people in the UK, if it's raining, they don't tend to go out. It's, you know, it's quite a miserable feeling that makes you want to kind of cozy up, get a cup of tea or a hot drink, and, you know, be a little bit lazy, to be honest.
A big thing about lifestyle as well is a lot of Aussies, I think I read a statistic somewhere that 90% of Aussies live 10 minutes from a beach, which is absolutely incredible. So with that being said, a majority of the Australian population probably live in a little bit of a donut around the perimeter. There will be dots of population in the inner bits, but the majority of the population, I believe, live coastal lifestyles. Whereas in the UK, people live all throughout the country. And the actual population of the country is something like, in the UK, I think it's around 70 million, whereas in Australia, it's 25 million. So It's
Crazy.
very, very different. So that condensed population of the UK in a smaller landmass really does kind of provide a different lifestyle. A lot of shops are local. Like, we mentioned this, didn't we, about family? We couldn't name a family member that is 5 minutes from a shop, like a local shop. So if you was to go into a shop, you would literally, walking distance would be 5 minutes. Now, some Australians may live close to shops, but that isn't the case for a lot of them. A lot more stuff can be further spread out, a little bit wider spreading, and that even comes down to the houses as well.
Point number 3 is the houses.
Yeah.
The houses for us is a big comparison. So living up in the north of England, we have a lot of smaller terrace houses. So we call them terrace houses, and they are usually 2 up, 2 down houses, very small rooms, not a lot of space, usually a yard instead of a garden. Whereas in Australia, we found here that the houses tend to be bigger, even though rent is expensive, and sometimes, a lot of people are only renting, say, a room. But in general, the houses are built with a lot more space, usually bigger gardens, sometimes even a pool if you're lucky. So that's extremely different to like what we're used to in the north of England.
Yeah. Where we are at the moment is a little bit more, I wouldn't say rural, but it's a little bit less dense than the cities. So if you're living in Australia and you're living in Sydney, or you're living even in Brisbane or any of the more populated, crowded cities, you will have a different experience to this. But from where we are at the moment, it's still very populated, but people are enabled a little bit more land, whether that's in the garden, whether that's just the houses themselves. If I compare an average Australian home to a UK home, they are very different in design. Like, design is hugely different. But a lot of these smaller terrace houses in the UK come from people who used to work in factories, used to work in mines up north. So they were built for workers, and they were basically dense, closed in like houses for families to live in whilst the families were working in the mines. Low income houses, and they still are around today. People renovate them, modernise them, but they are still very close, condensed, small houses. Now, this might not be seen as much in Australia, and if it is, please let us know, because we haven't really seen it. But generally, overall, the house shape and design, maybe a couple more bungalows, flat-shaped buildings, but the idea of a terrace house, that is a big, big difference to not see them readily built and everywhere around the streets. Now, this is a big difference for somebody even from the south of England, because we have a friend that came up north, and she was from Surrey, and she came up to Manchester, and even driving through, she was a bit like, what? Why are all the houses so close together? So this isn't just a difference for Aussies, but also even the southern parts of England. But our experience from living there to coming here, it's a big difference.
The 4th point that we'd like to make is about roads and driving. So again, that's very different in the UK.
Yeah.
We do have a lot more people on the roads. The roads are busier. There is a lot more accidents from what we know of, just simply because the amount of people that are there. And so this does, of course, change insurance prices. Fuel prices are also extremely high.
Yeah, massively.
Like coming here personally, we have noticed that the price in fuel is like 50% less than what we spend on average at home.
Quite odd.
And another one is insurance.
Yes.
So like for you to drive as, a male in your 20s in the UK, it's extremely expensive to get insurance. Insurance, again, is not too expensive here, not compared to the UK anyway.
Yeah.
Again, this is just our experience. This might not be for everybody, but again, we have noticed that's been, for us personally, a 50% decrease, again, approximately. So, that's huge. That's a huge difference, isn't it?
Massively. But as Cody mentioned, how busy the roads are as well is very different. So they aren't as populated, but also they're a lot bigger. So a lot of the roads themselves are actually quite larger and go on for a longer scale of time. You get a straight road in Australia, maybe a freeway or a highway, that just seems to stretch and is vast and kind of empty, like the cars actually on it aren't as filled as it would be in the UK. If you were to go over to the UK, and even just some of the village roads, small town roads, the idea of the scale of cars on the road in Australia, some of the utes, some of the big Jeeps that you can see over here, would never be seen on British roads, because you physically couldn't drive them down small village roads where the towns are so narrow and small and tucked together that if you took one of these down here, you'd probably be scraping the buildings at either side.
Yeah,
I can
that's
definitely
true.
think of roads in the UK where you wouldn't get half of the cars in Australia down, which is a really weird thought. So the next point we wanted to actually cover were the people. Now, this isn't a whole generalisation of the people because it's very different depending on where you are, even in the UK and Australia, I'm guessing. But on a whole, people are a lot more inviting and a lot more friendly. Even where we're from, in the north of England, people are known as a little bit more warm than the people in the southern parts of England. People would say, hello, good morning, how's your day? And then you would kind of go on about your day, but you would never engage in a full conversation or connect with somebody very often in the street that you hadn't ever met. Whereas over here, the chances of you bumping into somebody and that same day them inviting you around for a cup of tea, it seems to happen a lot more.
Yeah, it does. I don't know if that's just our experience, like people hear the accent and just want to know more about us, but we've met so many friends here. And going back to the UK, we used to go out on a lot of walks and we would still connect with a lot of people there as well.
Yeah.
But here, people are definitely a lot more inviting overall.
A lot more inviting and open, to the point of Brits can be quite reserved to a certain level as well. If you met somebody in Britain and that same day they were inviting you round to their house, what do they want? Kind of
Yeah,
it's kind of innate to British.
motive.
Yeah, what's the ulterior motive? Whereas they could just be genuine. But in Australia, that does seem to be a lot more common, and that's something that us Brits need to, when we come over, kind of wrap our heads around, because it's not really part of the culture to meet somebody in and go, oh, come round, or come and have a coffee at my house, like maybe out for a coffee, but to actually go to somebody's house is that's more of a close relationship, I would say. Now, this will vary on your personalities and the personalities of the people that you're meeting with. I'm guessing in cities, it might be a little bit more heads down and walk past one another, rather than a bit more of a rural spot where people are a little bit more inviting and friendly because they're not off to a certain location and they're heads down, but gunning to that point. That's the same as any city in Manchester, Liverpool, London, any of these black places will probably be very similar in the UK as well. But once again, this is just our experience, and what we've experienced, people seem to be a little bit more bubbly and friendly in Oz.
Another point is the food. So what we have noticed, back in the UK, we have a lot more Chinese takeaways. They're on near enough every corner of there's a couple in every village. And same with Indian restaurants. Whereas here, it's a lot more Thai and Japanese food, where we don't have as much of that. We do in the cities, of course, but comparing it from Sunshine Coast to where we're from, directly outskirts of Manchester, there is definitely a lot less Thai food and Japanese food. Personally, I don't know which one we'd prefer. I'd probably say we prefer Thai and Japanese food over Chinese and Indian, right?
Yeah, I would say as well, we'd kind of really wanted to get out here, so kind of depends on what you are pursuing or what you're wanting from life and stuff. We wanted to get out and experience a bit more outside lifestyle, which we were struggling with in the UK. And we also really wanted to maybe try some foods that we haven't really tried readily available in the UK. So you can get Thai food in the UK, but for a good one, we had to drive around about, was it 30 minutes?
40 minutes.
40 minutes. And as I said, everything's really condensed in the UK. So it was like the only good one that we could get was about 40 minutes away from us. Whereas if we wanted a good Indian, like British Indian, or Chinese, British Chinese, I wouldn't say true Chinese, authentic Chinese food. But if you were looking for those types of food, you would be readily available, and you probably wouldn't have to travel more than 5 or 10 minutes for a good rated and respected version of these foods. So it's a real nice switch up to come to us and try some different kind of cuisine that isn't as readily available, like sushi and Thai food really seems to be.
Cafe culture here in Australia is something that we've never seen before. So, it's quite normal, especially here on the Sunshine Coast, to on a Tuesday morning after 9 a.m. for a cafe to be quite busy. Now in the UK that would not be the case. There might be a bit of a morning rush, but as soon as it gets past 9 a.m, quite a lot of the cafes and businesses do struggle for business, at least up until lunchtime, and that's quite a common thing across the board. So we really do like the cafe culture out here, and how everyone is just obsessed with the coffee. Not every single person, but yeah, a lot of people like the coffee, and that's just a way of socialising.
Now moving on to our penultimate point, and that is what I would say is culture and history kind of morphed into one. Now this is a bit of a one that I would only say the UK, in a lot of Australians' eyes, has a little bit more variety of when it comes to why people would want to go to Britain. So the actual history and culture of Australia isn't as varying, and it doesn't scale as far back as Britain. So with a lot of people's ancestry coming from Britain, coming from Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and even England as well, all these spots, Aussies feel very connected sometimes to go back and experience that, and I can fully understand that. coming here, the kind of old listed graded buildings that you can go and see that are steeped in tradition, the places that, you know, ex-kings and, you know, going way back and way back when into history, you can go scale back and it's all documented, to stand in the same place that some of these historical figures have kind of basically stepped in a man-made structure, rather than, oh, let's say, I don't know, a historical figure stood here on this patch of land. You're actually in a building that was built by these historical figures. I can imagine is a really, really cool experience. So that would be a big switch up on the history side of stuff. And I can understand coming here now and experiencing, even not for so long, why Aussies would have a real drive and want to go and experience that. So it is a cool experience to see. Very different over here in certain areas, but that is one of the big things that I would see Aussies really lusting for at times.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, that isn't every Aussie, and also I think because we've grown up with it, it kind of feels like to see a castle or to see these kind of things just feels like a little bit of second nature, and probably taken for granted as well. Not really respected as much as some people would over here, but once again, that would be a similar kind of thing with like the ability of going to a gorgeous beach in Australia. That might be not as respected by some Australians as it would be some Brits, because the beaches in Britain are literally rock beaches, some of them, and families go and sit on them and lie down on the stones. And I can imagine as an Aussie seeing that, you would be like, what on earth is going on? That is not sand, that is physical rocks that people are lying on. And people do it.
The last point that we'd like to cover is the wildlife. Now, this is a big kind of difference that we noticed, that when we got here, you can't just go for a bushwalk off the paths. That is not something that you guys do here, where back in the UK, you could walk through any type of forest or bush and there's no dangers. You know, you don't necessarily need to have any sort of protective or, you know, any clothing on in particular. You can just go walking, and yeah, you don't even think about any dangers. Even if there is some in certain areas, you don't even need to really think about them. So that has been a big difference for us. You're constantly on alert for snakes, especially with having the pooch. You know, you're constantly looking for spiders and snakes and stuff that, you know, could be a problem for the dog or for yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been quite a big difference. I love the idea of potentially seeing nature that we've not really seen. It's like we've not seen too many snakes yet. I'm sure we will as it starts to heat up. And I like the idea of seeing them, but then there is the side of me that, like, if I go back to the UK, I would be like, oh, you know, I'm kind of relaxed in thinking I know the dog's safe. Definitely, and like, you know, stuff that you don't even have to think about too much when you're back there.
So for example, when we're releasing Picco even into the back garden in the evening, we would always go out and do a check first. We check around the perimeter of where he's going to go to, just to double check there isn't anything there and he's not going to hurt himself, or even worse, him go out and hurt something directly himself, which is possible with some of the little creatures that are about. Whereas in the UK, you wouldn't really get much in your garden and stuff. You could just release him, open the door, let him just run out, come back and then sort himself out. Now, the wildlife, including flora and fauna in the Sunshine Coast of Manchester, is very, very different. And that's obvious because they're in very different climates. So being on the opposite side of the world, obviously the wildlife is very, very different and so vast, so varying in many different areas, from the beaches to the forests to even just wandering down the road and seeing the different birds and different kind of creatures that come into the paths and interact. That has been one of our most favourite things that I've experienced so far, and if you've watched the vlogs you will notice that, because we're always out and about trying to experience new things, and I look forward to experiencing a lot more in the future. So that is one of the biggies that we don't think we've touched on enough, and we still know there's way more to go, even though we've done it pretty much every day.
There has been a lot of people commenting, saying, you know, telling us places that we need to go and visit, but we'd love to see even more recommendations. We have took quite a lot of notes from your comments, and we have put these into our diary for the next couple of weeks / months. But if you've got anywhere that you think that we cannot miss, please do comment below and let us know.
So with our rambling going on for a little bit, but this was the main focus of the video today, I hope you guys have enjoyed. We are actually going to wrap the video up here, so we're not rambling on too long. I hope none of our opinions have upset anybody, and I hope it was just kind of an overview of us kind of experiencing the similarities and differences. Not in depth, we can maybe jump back onto this subject again if you guys do enjoy it, but it's our roundup of what we've experienced in a very short time in Australia, and a lot more time to come in the near future. So thank you very much for watching, guys.
Don't forget to comment and like and support in any way that you can, so we can continue to create these videos for you. If you want to see more adventure videos, comment below and let us know. We are more than willing to be flexible for this fantastic community that is growing, that we are so grateful for.
Yeah, it's been incredible. The support's been out of this world, and thank you very much again, and see ya in the next one. Bye.
Bye.